let me just.
All right. Annie, first off, I just want to say to you, like, I don't know if I should say congratulations or just I hope you're just happy. I hope you are happy that you got justice for your role in this and for Tylee specifically and for all the victims. And I know your emotions are probably, I mean, you have put so much into this. So many people have. And everyone has had sort of different roles, but like you really dove into the investigation to try and understand this horrific sequence of events. Just what is going through your mind right now?
Well, first of all, I mean, just elation. Like I am absolutely just over the moon that justice was served. I am beyond grateful to everyone who played a role in where we are today, from the prosecutors, law enforcement, Judge Boyce, the jury, the media who has kept this story out in front of people for 3.5 years. And I mean, you have done an absolutely amazing job at that. And, just the fierceness with which you've followed the facts, followed the breadcrumbs, so to speak. So that's the big emotion, just relief. Like, yes, this is perfect. On the eve of Mother's Day, let Lori just kind of stew in her juices and with the reality of this is what she did as a mother. But then, there are times where it's like the raw emotion also hits, like the justice, obviously it doesn't bring them back. It doesn't, undo everything that was done, in this case. But at least it gives those of us who have carried these victims in our hearts, a little bit of latitude to now just begin to heal.
And so let's just recap, okay? She's guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, 2 counts. Her kids, J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. 3 counts of murder conspiracy. Her kids and Tammy Daybell, the woman who she basically forced out to be with Chad. We can say that now that she's convicted. Right. It's not prosecutors say or police say she's convicted. She did this and then grand theft.
Yeah.
Going into today, did you have any doubt when the verdict came that she could be let off?
No, I really didn't. And that's not revisionist. Having been in the courtroom, and you were in the courtroom for day 2 as I was, I just kind of felt like if they had put this case before the jury on day 3, they probably would have voted to convict her, because I mean, just by day 2, the evidence was so overwhelming. And then she was never going to get past just the reality of she never reported her kids missing. And I really love how the prosecution focused on, and then she was dancing on a beach. And then she was dancing on a beach, while the rest of the world was worried about these kids trying to find JJ and Tylee, she was back in Hawaii with Chad. And so, I love that it didn't matter who actually did the killings. It was very clear she was down with all of it. Although the detail of her hair being in the duct tape on the outside of the plastic, I understand Jim Archibald, he was doing his job, which was a very difficult job, and he tried to shoehorn in a little reasonable doubt, like, oh, it could have been on his pajamas, but would that make it to the duct tape outside the bags? No. So yeah, I felt very confident that justice was going to be served.
Were you surprised at her reaction or how she reacted, her facial expressions? You know them. You've seen the photos by now. What's your reaction?
I wasn't. I think she had kind of steeled herself for convictions, and she's a psychopath. So I think for the most part, most emotion she experiences is more kind of mimicking the emotions of people who feel genuine empathy, and I just don't think that she has any level of regret or sense of responsibility in these crimes. So, but it was interesting when the judge told everyone to stand, to see her stand there and cross her arms, kind of like how she was on day 2 when Judge Boyce said she couldn't leave. She had to sit there and could be bound and gagged if necessary. She had that same, the same expression, the same body language of, she was angry, and I was like, sorry, princess, this is what happened. So, but no, I wasn't surprised.
I would like to know if you have anything to say to her on this platform, if you have a message. And at some point, did you ever have hatred towards her, especially now that these there's a guilty verdict on all counts, and there's validation here from the jury?
Yeah, so I don't have anything to say to Lori. Like I said, in my opinion, she's a psychopath. And I feel like I'd be spitting into the wind saying anything to her. So I kind of don't even want to dignify her with a response. But yes, I have struggled with the hatred, and just a deep bitterness. There are mornings I just wake up just feeling this hatred for each round of new information about just how much she was involved. It's like you have to kind of process through that. But I try not to stay parked in those really dark places, because I know just from having followed true crime before this case, that being so close to a case like this, it can destroy people. And so I try to just process through the emotions, and then kind of give myself permission to live my life. And I definitely don't want to go through the rest of my life with Lori Vallow on my radar. So I just tell myself, okay, I have to deal with this now, but then I will move on.
There's so many family members, that connected to these 3 victims. It's like, a whole diagram of family members and relatives on this side and that side. And so
Right.
just to remind people, you're Tylee Ryan's aunt, you're
Yes.
Joseph Ryan's sister, and we know Joseph Ryan died in April of 2018 in Phoenix. And so even though that case got closed and his death was deemed natural, I mean, you stood up for him, and that was really the beginning of a trail of deaths here. We know that he was tased by Alex Cox, who's also dead. I mean, there's just so much violence. There is just so much left behind, so much aftermath in Lori Vallow's wake. And I would just like to know why you decided to just invest pretty much your life into figuring out what happened, since January 2020, around that time. Just did it help you? Did it help you somehow heal or grow, or what did this do for you?
It kind of goes back to your point about, there are so many different victims, and obviously we all have very different personalities, very different ways of processing things. For me, I experienced kind of a tectonic shift in May of 2020, when there were a number of friends and family members who all kind of came forward, and it seemed like it was very coordinated, their interviews, whether they were or not. I'm just saying, like, from my perspective, it seemed coordinated, that everyone had the same message. It was kind of a two-pronged fork. Lori was a perfect mother, if not perfect, a very, very good mother. And my brother Joe was a pedophile. And for me, when these different people were doing these interviews, I started picking up on contradictions in some of their statements. And so it started with building out a dashboard, because I just wanted to, as an analyst, I was like, I want to be able to search across these different interviews and find these contradictions. And so just like in Facebook groups, you know, I was sharing some of the contradictions and stuff, but it just it didn't help me heal. Like, I knew it was that I was taking a bit of a risk by diving into these details. So there were times I just kind of had to take a step back and decompress a little, but it became kind of a compulsion to tell the victims' stories, because when the FOIA docs came out, and you were one of the reporters who very graciously, you know, shared the FOIA docs with me, I started to find even more contradictions. And, you know, there were stories within the story. And so I don't know, it was just kind of a compulsion almost to try to find each of their stories and tell their stories based on, you know, these FOIA docs, as well as, you know, some of the interviews and some of the other evidence that you had put out there. And yeah, so that was my intent.
And I think it is also important to, every time we talk about this case, to say their names and remind people: J.J. Vallow, Tylee Ryan, Tammy Daybell, they were murdered, and now they have justice. And Charles Vallow was murdered too, and that's a separate case, but it is huge and crucial and important to all of this. And
yeah.
Lastly, what are your thoughts that Lori Vallow at some point will be extradited back to Maricopa County? You know, several weeks or several months, whatever it is, after she's in Idaho Department of Corrections, it is supposed to happen.
Right.
And she will have to face justice in Maricopa County for that murder.
Yeah, I can't imagine. There are times that I do actually feel an empathy toward Lori. Like, when I first saw her, when I walked into the courtroom, it was the first time we had ever like locked eyes since all of this happened. It was only a couple seconds, but she looked like a trapped animal, like an animal that was caught in a trap. And so, you know, there are times when I think about just the weight of the reality of her involvement in these murders, and how, you know, like now she's having to cash all of these checks that she wrote so carelessly while thinking she could just get away with murder. And I think that, you know, definitely with Charles' murder, I think she was probably surprised by how easy it was to get away with murder. And so now I think just the reality is just most likely going to cause her at some point just to collapse. But I'm not quite as confident that justice will be done in that case, just because there were so many egregious errors made by law enforcement, in my opinion, having, you know, gone through the photos from the police report. And, you know, and as you know, there were a lot of really glaring contradictions in Lori's and Alex's statements that weren't chased down and stuff. So I think the prosecuting attorney for Maricopa County is really going to have a heavy lift. But yeah, at least she will have to deal with the reality of that's in her immediate future.
Hey, Annie, thank you so much for sharing just some of that time. I know we could go on and talk about these documents but I just really wanted to get your initial thoughts and reaction on just the it's a really big day for these victims and family members of these victims.
Yeah.
And so thank you. And this is just one chapter closed in the Lori Vallow case.
Yeah. And honestly, Justin, thank you so much for everything that you've done for this case to, just keep it in the forefront. And for heading back up to Idaho. I'm glad you were there for the big day.
I appreciate that. All right, Annie, you take care. Talk soon.
Okay, have
Bye.
a great weekend.